Number 5. Chernobyl. I've made the executive decision to kick off today with the most obvious location. For those who might not be aware of the horrors of Chernobyl, allow me to start today off with a mini sad history lesson. So the disaster was a nuclear accident that occurred on the 26th of April of 1986 at the number 4 reactor in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near the city of Pripyat. It is one of only 2 nuclear energy accidents rated at 7, which is the maximum severity on the International Nuclear Event Scale, the other being the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan. The meltdown and explosions ruptured the reactor core. And destroyed the reactor building. So this was immediately followed by an open-air reactor core fire, which lasted until May 4th of 1986, during which airborne radioactive contaminants were released and deposited onto other parts of the USSR and Europe. Approximately 70% landed in Belarus, around 16 kilometers away. The fire released about the same amount of radioactive material as the initial explosion. In response to the initial accident, a 10-kilometer radius exclusion zone was created 36 hours after the accident, from which approximately 49,000 people were evacuated, primarily from Pripyat. The exclusion zone was later increased to a radius of 30 kilometers, from which an additional 68,000 people were evacuated. Following the disaster, Pripyat was abandoned and eventually replaced by the new purpose-built city of Slavutich. In July of 2019, the Ukrainian president announced that the Chernobyl site would become an official tourist attraction. Immunology experts recommend that tourists wear clothes and shoes they are comfortable with throwing away, avoid plant life, especially the depths of the forest due to the high levels of radiation. Oh, why? Oh, just because the areas were not cleaned in the aftermath of the disaster and remain highly contaminated. Research showed that fungus, moss, and mushrooms are radioactive. So among the buildings that were abandoned were multiple schools, with the small city having 15 preschools for just under 5,000 attendees. Most of the buildings in the city are practically empty, but not the schools. School books and class magazines were clearly of no value to looters, and city residents were more worried about saving at least something from their personal property, leaving the buildings almost intact, minus the effects of being left empty over time. Moving on to other places of note, the Pripyat amusement park was set to have its grand opening on the 1st of May in 1986, in time for the May Day celebrations, but those plans were cancelled on April 26. Several sources report that the park was opened for a short time on the 27th before the announcement to evacuate the city was made to distract the residents from the unfolding disaster nearby. Constructed under the Soviet Union as a park of culture and rest, typical of many large cities in the then Soviet Union, the amusement park's attractions were manufactured by the firm Attraction, who were responsible for the construction of many of the amusement parks which remain to be seen around the former Soviet Union today in various states of repair. Located northwest to the Palace of Culture in the center of Pripyat, the park had 5 attractions: the iconic 26-meter Ferris wheel titled Circular Overview, the Autodrome bumper cars, a paratrooper ride called Chamomile, Russian swing boats, and also a carnival shooting game. Fun fact, the successor to the original company is still manufacturing the Ferris wheel, paratrooper, and bumper cars with a similar design as of 2017. Radiation levels around the park vary. The liquidators washed radiation into the soil after the helicopters carrying radioactive materials used the grounds as a landing strip, so concrete areas are less radioactive. However, areas where moss is built up can emit levels amongst the highest levels of radiation in the whole area. So the Ferris wheel actually made news in September of 2017 when Polish tourists turned it mechanically for the first time since 1986, later returning it to its original position. As much as it would be fascinating to explore history, I'll wait till it's a little less detrimental to my health. Number 4. The Paris Catacombs. Deep underground the city of Paris are hundreds of miles of tunnels in a complex network that is one of the oldest in the world. It's a darker city that few tourists experience due to the high risk of danger. People often get lost. The walls can also collapse at any moment, so many who venture there wear miners' helmets. There's no electricity among the endless winding canals, corridors, and crypts filled with mounds of unidentified skulls, which are estimated to be about 6 million deceased Parisians. There are parts so tight that you have to lie on your belly and slither forward like a worm to get through. Only a small section of the catacombs is accessible to tourists, while the rest has been illegal to enter since 1955. Look, I'm not saying you shouldn't explore the tourist accessible areas. Heck, I want to visit those myself, but stay out of the illegal areas. Urban explorers who frequent the catacombs call themselves cataphiles, which I must admit is a very smart moniker. They paint, sculpt, and create other art, while also building false walls, trap doors, and secret chutes to keep away the cataflics or catacops who try to catch them trespassing. You must know a cataphile who can be your guide to even try to explore the unknown, or else risk getting lost or stuck for who knows how long. As much as I love exploring creepy history, the thought of getting lost in such a cursed place is a type of scared I'm not fond of, and don't particularly ever want to experience.
In at number 2 we have the 7 Gates of Hell in Pennsylvania. In a quiet little backwater of York, Pennsylvania, one finds Helm Township, by all accounts a pleasant, friendly town and unremarkable were it not be for the rumoured existence of a gateway to hell in a nearby forest. One of the better known legends tied to the location is that an insane asylum on the town's outskirts which supposedly burnt to the ground in the 19th century. 7 gates were built surrounding the remains of the asylum. At every gate, with the distance closing in, the police found more of the escaped patients, capturing them peaceably but killing any that showed aggression in violent ways. According to this particular legend, the inmates, most of them criminally insane, escaped, only to be recaptured using a series of tall fences and security gates. Many lost their lives to guards in the process. What the police and citizens didn't realize was that the construction of the gates prevented the souls of the dead from passing on to the other side, forcing them to be trapped for eternity in the remains of the asylum. Legend says the anger, hate and violence in these souls caused a rift that allowed for hell to open, the gates preventing anything to be let out but also preventing anything from travelling in. An alternate story tells of a doctor who once lived in the town. This man, by some accounts a Satanist, was said to have designed a series of strange gates on this land, which followed a winding path running deeper and deeper into the forest. Where stories agree is that those who pass through the gates in order will find themselves transported straight to the underworld. Only the first gate is visible by daylight, situated in woodland just off Helm's Trout Run Road. Regardless of what the origin of the gates are, if you were to take a trip to the gates, you'll only find one. The rest of the gates can only be seen during the night. They exist in a realm between light and dark and can only be accessed at that time. If you were to find and pass through all 7 gates, you'll find yourself in hell, unable to escape and trapped for all of eternity. Those who have tried to look for the gates report seeing shadow figures wandering through the forest, the smell of something burning, and screams in the distance. Worst of all, some say they know of a few who have found at least 5 gates, but went off looking for the 6th, they never returned. And finally, in at number 1 we have Plutos Gate in Turkey. Known as Plutos Gate or Plutonian in Greek, the archaeological site in southwestern Turkey was discovered in 2013 after following the route of a thermal spring. The site matches closely the description of the temple to the underworld that disappeared in the 6th century. The most notable feature of this gate is that deadly vapor still is blown out of the gate. Additionally, this location was once used in ancient rituals to the gods of the underworld and still claims the lives of unfortunate birds who get too close. An archaeological dig revealed the remains of an ancient temple situated on a thermal spring, long believed to have been a gateway to hell. This well-documented temple of Pluto disappeared from record sometime around the 6th century. Amongst the distinguishing features of this particular gate are the toxic fumes that waft out from the tunnels beneath. In times of antiquity, these were often inhaled by the priests of Pluto, promptly sending them into hallucinogenic trance states. Writing at some time around the year 0 AD, the Greek philosopher Strabo claimed that any animal that passes inside meets instant death. Even now, the poisonous vapors claim the lives of birds that fly or nest too close to the ruins. Only the eunuchs of Cybele, an ancient fertility goddess, were able to enter the Hellgate without any apparent damage, the report said. With the mysterious deadly vapor and ancient rituals, the gods being transformed at this location, it's not hard to believe that the devil may just be lurking deep within the temple. Coming in at number 5 we have Tiandu Chang, China. Tiandu Chang is a town in the suburbs of Hangzhou, China, whose construction began around 2007. Built as an enormous luxury housing development, Tiandu Chang emulates the famous French City of Lights in everything, from the period-correct architecture to the 300-foot tall miniature Eiffel Tower. It even has a replica fountain from the Luxembourg Gardens. The city centre is an abandoned copy of Paris that even features the Eiffel Tower, which is 1/3 of its original size. With a capacity for over 100,000 residents, the city has remained mostly abandoned except for the employees of a nearby French-themed amusement park, according to City Lab. Tiandu Chang lacks much of what Paris has to offer though, including people. The lack of people is mostly attributed to its odd location, as Tiandu Chang is surrounded mostly by farmland and odd dead-end roads that snake throughout the countryside. When it first opened its gates more than a decade ago, it was described as a ghost town. While many of its homes remain vacant, the population has grown into the thousands, and it attracts a steady stream of Chinese and international tourists, including newlyweds looking for a picture-perfect backdrop. In at number 4 we have Ruby, Arizona. Ruby, Arizona is one of the best preserved abandoned cities in the United States, filled with history and the shell of the city it used to be. By the 1870s, new prospectors made several additional claims, and the fledgling settlement formed at the mountain base was called Montana Camp. Other lead, copper and zinc veins were also found in the immediate vicinity, beckoning yet more miners to the fledgling settlement. settlement. Throughout the years, the city and mining company associated with it got passed down to many different owners, while in the 1914s, Andrew sold the store to Philip C. Clark, who soon built a bigger and better one just up the hill, the remains of which still stand today. Though Ruby was growing, it was still a lawless place, and finally Philip Clark became so concerned for his family's safety that he moved them away to nearby Oro Blanco. However, he continued to work towards growing the city of Ruby and amassed large amounts of land and cattle until 1920, when he sold the store to brothers John and Alexander Frazier. From 1934 to 1937, the Montana mine was the leading producer of lead and zinc in the state, and the third largest in silver production. However, the ore finally played out in 1940, and the town became a ghost. The mill operation was moved to Sahuarita. The post office closed forever on May 31st, 1941, though no records exist on the dollar amount taken from the Montana mine. One estimate puts the total for the Oro Blanco district at more than 10 million for the period between 1909 and 1949. The ruby mines remained intact until 1970, when they finally collapsed. For decades, the area remained private because no access was allowed to anyone other than the owners. Ruby has suffered from vandalism and theft often. Today, Ruby remains private, owned by a couple of different families working to preserve the town and make it into a recreational area. The good news is they now allow visitors. The old settlement continues to boast more than 24 buildings. Only Vulture City rivals it in the number of remaining structures in a ghost town mining camp.
Number 2. Castle of Good Hope. Coming up next on our list of haunted hotspots is the Castle of Good Hope in Cape Town, South Africa. It was first built in the 17th century by the Dutch East India Company, so bad vibes there to begin with. It's the oldest colonial building in South Africa, and if you believe the local legends, is allegedly one of the more paranormal spots in the entire country. Now, the first ghost sighting came from 1915, when a tall, pale, mysterious man dressed in black, much like yours truly, was spotted walking seemingly out of nowhere alongside one of the castle's ramparts before vanishing as soon as he appeared. Well, that's pretty weird and seemed like an isolated incident until in 1947 this same strange man just couldn't stop appearing, making regular visits and check-ins for the castle weeks on end. He would be seen jumping off the castle's wall, seemingly plummeting to his doom, only to reappear again, to do it all again. Maybe he's just having fun. I imagine being a ghost is dreadfully boring. He kinda sounds like a sick ghost, all things considered. Sounds like he just wants to bungee jump, hang 10, vibe out. I can get down with this ghost. Another popular ghost story from the castle is that of their former governor, one Peter Gijsbert van Noot. You try saying that 5 times fast, I barely made it through that once. He passed in the castle in the 23rd of April, 1728, the same day he had sentenced 7 army deserters to the death sentence. Now the story goes that one of these soldiers hexed him and demanded he face and watch the execution. Van Noot was apparently more than a little bit squeamish at this prospect and refused the invitation. And if you believe the stories, later that day was found dead at his desk, slumped over. And some believe his ghost still wanders the castle's halls. And he's far from the only spirit reported to inhabit the castle. There's also reports of hearing a man and a woman arguing outside of a guard station, and as well a lady of the manor who visits esteemed privileged ghosts. Imagine that, getting haunted by the 1%. Number 1. The Hellfire Club. Now, don't get your hopes up too much. The party won't be meeting for a D&D session with Eddie Munson anytime soon at this Hellfire Club, although the name might come from it. I'm not sure, to be honest. If the Duffer Brothers want to clear that up for me, let me know. My DMs are open. The Hellfire Club in Dublin, otherwise known as the Montpelier Hill, was once home to a hunting lodge in the 17th century owned by one Richard Parsons, a man obsessed with black magic and the occult. It's said that the Hellfire Club was a club for Satanists, and the leader was referred to as the King of Hell and would dress like the devil during meetings. Honestly, sounds like kind of a fun club. All meetings they left a seat open just in case Lucifer wanted to drop by for a few hands of poker, clink some glasses with them. Stories go on to say that members of the Hellfire Club participated in all manner of dark and sinister ritual, sacrificing cats, goats, and if legends are to be believed, even the servants of the Hellfire Club were offered some membership package. Now, there's a very famous story out of the club that says one fateful day, a strange man appeared and asked if he could join in at the card game for the night. As there was always an open seat, they offered it to him. and during the game, a player dropped his cards, and when he went underneath the table to retrieve them, saw that the strange man had hooves in place of his feet. And upon rising from the table, the stranger had vanished. Probably for the best. I cannot imagine that a game of cards against the devil would be beneficiary for anyone except maybe Satan. I would not call his bluff, I would just fold every hand. The building was scorched and set ablaze in 1750, with many differing accounts as to what caused the flame. Some say it was the club itself that set the building on fire to give it a more intimidating appearance and keep out outsiders. Some say the devil did it as retribution for a ritual, and some say it was just a duel or a brawl that ended badly and got a bit rowdy. Whatever the case, the Hellfire Club relocated their activities sometime around 1760 and abandoned their original building, where it still stands today. You can visit it today, and it's a pretty popular tourist destination for urban explorers and paranormal investigators who want to see if perhaps there's any residual black magic in the soil and walls there.
Number 5 on this list is Room 39. Room 39 is located in North Korea and might just be the most secretive place in all of North Korea. Business Insider says, in the words of journalist Kelly Olson, Room 39 is one of the most secret organizations in arguably the world's most secretive state. Created in the late 1970s, Room 39 is said to be located inside the Workers' Party building in Pyongyang, taking its name, according to some sources, from the office it occupied at the party headquarters in its early days. Although there isn't much official information on the room due to the secrecy of its activities, it's believed that it raises funds through commercial enterprises, both legal and illegal, with activities ranging from counterfeiting to the sale of gold, or weapons. This network of companies present in various parts of the world is estimated to have been able to contribute up to $2 billion a year to North Korea. It's speculated that Room 39 could be behind the sophisticated counterfeiting of $100 supernote bills that were issued over decades. It's really hard to write on this room because it literally is so secret. Like, I truly have absolutely no idea what goes on in Room 39 or who's in Room 39. All I know is that it probably exists in North Korea and that we do not want to be a part of it. I have to imagine that entering that room is pretty much a death sentence. Everything going on in there would be so top secret that leaving the area alive would be near impossible. Now, don't get me wrong, it would be very cool to see who's in this room and what they're actually up to. Big organized crime like this, when the government is involved and corporations are a part of it, that's super interesting and I would love to know more. But ultimately, the juice isn't worth the squeeze on this one, so stay away from Room 39 in North Korea. Not like you'd actually be able to get in there anyways though, because it's North Korea, but still. Number 4 on this list is Snake Island. Look, I like snakes, guys, or at least I'm not overtly scared of them. But at some point there needs to be a line, and going to Snake Island would definitely be crossing that line. Business Insider says, located about 100 kilometers off the coast of Sao Paulo, this island might seem the ideal exotic spot in which to lose yourself. But the truth is that for decades, the place has been uninhabited due to having been completely invaded by lethal snakes. Between 1 and 5 snakes per square meter inhabit the island. And if that isn't terrifying enough, it's worth noting that the snakes that live here are one of the most venomous in the world. The golden lancehead viper can reach up to half a meter in length, and with a strong, fast-acting venom can dissolve the flesh around its bites. It's for this reason the Brazilian government expressly forbids visiting the island. Think about that, folks. This island is straight up so deadly that for your own safety, the government forbids you from going. The Smithsonian says these vipers' venom can kill a person in under an hour, and numerous local legends tell of the horrible fates that awaited those who wandered onto the shores of Snake Island. Rumor has it that a hapless fisherman landed onto the island in search of bananas, only to be discovered days later in his boat, dead in a pool of blood with snake bites on his body. From 1909 to the 1920s, a few people did live on the island in order to run its lighthouse. But according to another local tale, the last lighthouse keeper, along with his entire family, died when a cadre of snakes slithered into his home through the windows. Unless you have a death wish, don't go to Snake Island. Number 3 on this list is North Sentinel. North Sentinel seems like a beautiful island to visit on the outside, but there's actually something very unique going on here. Business Insider says, while the rest of the islands in this archipelago are somewhat larger and better known, North Sentinel, full of mangroves and surrounded by coral, has remained virtually untouched by the outside world. It might sound like paradise, but the island couldn't be further from it. While its geography makes it one of the most isolated places on Earth, it is inhabited by one of the world's few remaining uncontacted tribes. The indigenous people of this island, referred to as the Sentinelese, have had practically no influence from the modern world. Throughout history, encounters with the population have been met with violence. In 2006, they killed 2 fishermen whose boat had been dragged by the current to their shores. According to The Guardian, a 3-mile restriction zone prevents visitors from entering the territory. According to Survival, an NGO for the rights of indigenous and tribal peoples, the Indian government has abandoned any plans to contact the Sentinels. The entire tribe could be wiped out by diseases to which they have no immunity, which is why authorities respect their wish to remain uncontacted. This is truly insane if you think about it. Literally an entire society on an island with hardly any knowledge of the outside world at all. Like, I wonder what they know about and what they don't know about. Do they know about technology? Do they know where they are on the planet? Do they know about other countries that exist around them? And also, how do they get food and water? What are their houses like? What's the everyday lifestyle of somebody living here like? What language do they speak? These are all questions that I think a lot of people would love to know the answers to, but it's just impossible to actually find out without encroaching on their territory. This could prove dangerous for those who go there, and then also dangerous to the people who live there themselves. So for everyone's safety, we just need to let it be.
In second place, we have the island of Poglia. Yep, another entire abandoned island. This one's a little creepier though. So the island is located in the lagoon near Venice, and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from the island, which was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick to prevent the spread of disease and contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. Yes, I'll backtrack and elaborate. So in 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice and Poglia, like many other small islands at the time, and it became a quarantine colony. The plague on average killed like 1 out of 3 Europeans, by the way. So fearing the unbridled spread of the disease, Venice exiled many of its symptom-bearing citizens there. So at the island center, the dead and those too sick to protest were burned on giant pyres. So this included the tens of thousands of Venice citizens just dying on the mainland. Those fires would burn once more in 1630 when the Black Death again swept through the city. The small island was used as a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil. Cripes, I hope it's a good fertilizer. The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. A doctor at the asylum was known to have experimented on patients with crude lobotomies and jumped from the bell tower in the late 1930s after claiming he had been driven mad by ghosts. Decades later, nearby residents claimed to still hear the bell, although it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that some restoration work had started in recent history, but abruptly stopped without explanation. Okay, maybe this is one spot on today's list that I might not want to visit. And in first place, we have St. Elmo in Colorado. St. Elmo is a ghost town and allegedly the best preserved ghost town in all of Colorado, while also boasting the most hauntings and paranormal activity of any ghost town in the state. The town was a major gold and silver trading center and hub of life for many pioneers, outlaws, and miners for decades. So it was originally called Forest City, but St. Elmo was settled in 1878 and became an official township in 1880 with the arrival of the first post office. So the residents of the town were forced to change the name because there were already too many forest cities in the area. So gotta applaud the originality. St. Elmo went through a massive gold rush, reaching the height of its population of 2,000 residents in only 10 days. The majority of the town worked in one of the 4 local mines. The Mary Murphy mine was the most profitable mine and the longest operating, having produced over $60 million worth of gold while it was in operation. When the mines began to close down, the town began to dwindle. The Mary Murphy mine continued to operate until 1922, but was shut down when the railroad was abandoned. Postal service was discontinued in 1952 after the death of St. Elmo's postmaster. Now for the fun part, ghost stories. I saved the best for last for a reason. The most famous ghost of St. Elmo is Annabelle Dirty Annie Stark, not to be confused with the beloved Annabelle doll. This Annabelle is the descendant of Anton and Anna Stark, who arrived in St. Elmo with the Pacific Railroad in 1881. Anton was a section boss in the mines, while Anna ran the Home Comfort Hotel located on Poplar Street and the general store. Oh, and both structures are still standing today. Anna Stark was known as a cruel and harsh woman who never allowed her 3 children, Roy, Tony, and Annabelle, out in the town to mingle or work alongside what she deemed the simple town folk. Annabelle grew up attractive and passionate for the town, and her love of St. Elmo was fierce. After the death of her mother, Annabelle and Tony inherited the hotel, and the once impeccably clean establishment fell to shambles. So along with the decline of the town, Annabelle began to lose her grasp on reality. The town soon called her Dirty Annie because she would emerge in filthy clothing and her hair was in a tangled mess all the time. Finally, free of the harsh rule of her mother, most people assumed this was her quiet rebellion. Residents remember strolling the main street with her firearm loaded and hung over one shoulder, ready to protect the town from anyone who dared to threaten it. Since her death, it is told she can still be found roaming the streets. Only a short while after Annabelle had passed away, the hotel was left to a family friend whose grandchildren were playing inside the hotel, when suddenly all of the doors slammed shut and the temperature dropped 20 degrees. The children cried and screamed, and finally the room returned to the outside temperature, and the door slowly swung open. Oh, that's not the only ghost story. Don't worry. A woman skiing down Poplar Street at dusk was struck by a peculiar sight of a lovely-looking woman in a long white gown glaring out of the second-story window of the Home Comfort Hotel. Now, the skier was shocked. She knew the owner of the hotel was on vacation, and nobody was supposed to be inside. As she turned to see what the woman was eyeing, she noticed snowmobiles approaching. So, sidebar, snowmobiling is illegal in St. Elmo, so the skier went and advised the group, who promptly apologized and went back where they came from. When she turned back to look at the hotel, the woman in the window was still watching, and she lowered her head, nodded at the skier, turned and vanished before her eyes. So curious and in disbelief, the skier went back the next day to find every window and door were locked. When the owner of the hotel returned, the two women searched the property with nothing to be found. So was it Annabelle keeping watch? Be sure to let me know in the comments what you think.
Number 5 on this list is the Molly Brown House. If you live in Denver, then there is no way that you aren't familiar with this haunted place. Thrillist says you've no doubt heard of the Molly Brown House and likely passed it on the street once or twice too. Molly Brown was a notable member of Denver's elite and perhaps known best for being a Titanic survivor, and despite allegedly living a relatively happy life, visitors to the museum and staff have reported quite a bit of strange happenings. Some have smelled what's believed to be husband J.J. Brown's pipe, or have witnessed lights off and on the fritz, and staff have reported furniture being seemingly rearranged. Sometimes figures can even be seen roaming the house. A visit is worth it alone for the history, but the potential for getting a bit spooked or walking into a cold spot is definitely an added bonus. We once again have one of those locations where no one has any idea why it's haunted, it just is. Maybe it's the connection to the Titanic that has got this place acting funky. Obviously, that was a very unnatural occurrence and took the lives of tons of people in a very sad way. So I could believe that the Titanic and the survivor of the Titanic plays some role into why this place is haunted the way that it is. Good news is that this isn't the worst haunting that you can run into. Yes, you will get a little scared for sure. You might smell something funny, or have a ghost pull something on you, or even maybe have small valuables go missing. But ultimately, you probably shouldn't be dragged to the underworld here by some shadow demon or anything like that. So I guess if you were to visit any place on this list, then this one wouldn't be the worst. Just be prepared for what's coming, because if you aren't, then it could leave you with some serious mental trauma. Number 4 on this list is Phantom Canyon Road. You need to be very careful on this road because there is a good chance you could suffer a serious crash if you aren't. Thrillist says a haunted road is one thing, but a haunted road in Colorado means you're likely on the edge of a mountain and at some serious elevation. Phantom Canyon Road is a detour off the Gold Belt Tour byway connecting Cripple Creek and Florence, and was originally the railroad for that route. As you drive along, you can clearly see the ghost towns of Wilbur, Adelaide, and Glenbrook, and legend has it that the reason for Phantom Canyon's name is credited to sightings of a man wearing a prison uniform walking along the tracks in the 1890s. The man supposedly had been executed at the Colorado State Penitentiary a few days days earlier. So yeah guys, you better have your wits about you, cause if you don't, this ghost might come out and startle the crap out of you, and then the next thing you know, you're gonna be face deep into a tree somewhere. It also just adds to the horror ambiance that you're driving past several ghost towns along the way. Like, of course, they just had to be on the side of the road as you're also getting stalked by this ghost prisoner. No one really knows what this prisoner wants with you, but let's face it, I can't imagine it's good. My dude was executed back in the day, so for one, what he did was probably pretty bad to warrant a punishment like that, and then secondly, he literally got executed, and I can only guess that his ghost probably isn't too pleased about that. Y'all need to be especially careful if you're driving down this road, cause at any point this guy could pop out.
Located at the end of the Mani Peninsula in Greece, you'll find a small landmass called Cape Matapan. The caves in this area open at sea level into a cliff face beneath the headland, the exact point marked by the ruins of a Spartan temple above. The inhabitants built several temples at the site, with the most notable being in dedication to Poseidon and Apollo, for which Strabo in the 1st century AD and Pausanias in the 2nd century AD describe a cult temple that worshipped Poseidon and fronted a cave-like temple on the headland. The cave was believed to be the gateway to Hades, the realm of the dead named for the patron god of the underworld, in which the departed souls were transported across the rivers Styx and or Acheron by Charon the ferryman to be judged on whether they would reside in Elysium or Tartarus. This was one of the several entrances that the ancient Greeks ascribed to Hades, the kingdom of the shades. Others were to be found at the Necromantian of Ephyra, as well as at Alipotropa, another smaller cave network on the Mani. Here, according to the stories, is the place where Orpheus entered the underworld in search of his lost love Eurydice. When the hero Hercules passed down into the underworld, it was again through the Cape Matapan caves. These are not the only legend ascribed to the remote peninsula, however. The Spartans viewed this as a highly significant place of worship, and they built several temples to their gods along the rocky headland. Most prominent amongst the surviving ruins are the remains of a temple dedicated to the sea god Poseidon, located on a hill directly above the cave to Hades. Another story related by Pausanias linked to the picturesque cape relates to the poet Arion, who escaped from pirates to be carried ashore by a pod of dolphins. A bronze statue of the poet riding a dolphin stands on the crest of the cape, not far from the ruins of a temple raised in honor of the sea god Poseidon. The caves at Matapan can still be entered by visitors, although a boat is required to pass through the watery mouth of this particular hellgate. In at number 4 we have Acton Tunichil Muknal Cave in Belize. Uncovered in 1980, the Acton Tunichil Muknal is a mine archaeological site that includes skeletons, ceramics and stoneware. Acton Tunichil Muknal Cave, otherwise known as the Cave of the Stone Sepulchre, was first entered by the Mayans in AD 300 to 600. It was not until the late AD 700 to 900 that the Mayans went deeper into the cave to perform their ceremonies. The cave is a maze of chambers along with a cathedral-like area for ceremonial sacrifices. In the cave, archaeologists found numerous skeletons, but what makes it even creepier is the fact that most of the skeletons belong to sacrificed people. Many of the remains and artifacts are completely calcified in the cave. Almost all lost their lives to blunt trauma to the head, while most of the pottery found at the site dates from between 700 to 900 AD, which is likely when the bodies found here were sacrificed. One of the cave's most notorious features is the skeleton of a girl whose bones have been calcified into a crystallized appearance. This skeleton is known as the Crystal Maiden. It is unknown what the circumstances of the sacrifices were, though some believe they were to appease the rain god Chak, or possibly the gods of the underworld. Another theory holds that these were believed to be witches, possibly suffering from some kind of mental or physical ailments, and that leaving them unburied in the cave would ensure that their spirits were trapped there. Therefore, from the location to the remains that were found and rituals that were performed here, it's safe to assume that this might just be one of the places that the devil may be hiding. In at number 3 we have the Gates of Guinea in New Orleans. According to voodoo mythology, the newly dead are sent to a kind of purgatory before traveling to meet their ancestors in the deep waters. Known as Guinea, this realm is presided over by the notorious Loire, who goes by the name of Baron Samedi. Often depicted as a skeleton in corpse paint dressed in a top hat and tails, the Baron is a powerful symbol of death and rebirth, guarding the crossroads which form portals to other worlds. The most important of all these portals are the Gates of Guinea themselves. While some followers of voodoo interpret the 7 gates as a spiritual metaphor, others believe them to exist in the physical realm. One of these stories locates the gates in New Orleans. To enter Guinea, it is said that one must open the 7 gates in the correct order. There are tales of voodoo practitioners practitioners opening the gates of Guinea to reclaim the souls of the dead. Souls in this lost land are also considered to be at high risk from hoodoo magicians, who have the power to reanimate them as zombies. Although the exact locations of the gates have never been disclosed, there have been oblique suggestions over the years that a clue may lie in the Vevi, or summoning sigil of Baron Samedi himself. Appearing as a crucifix surmounted by 7 stars, the symbol might indeed serve as a map of sorts. Once aligned over the crossroads of Canal Street and Basin Street in the city's French Quarter, the stars of the Vevi seem to fall on notable surrounding cemeteries. Therefore, it's not too uncommon to believe that this might be the spot the devil is hiding, with all the talks of spirits, the Baron and the underworld at this location. In at number 3 we have Wittennum, Australia. Located 1400 miles northeast of Perth, Australia lies Wittennum, a former blue asbestos mining town that has since been named the largest contaminated site in the southern hemisphere. Despite signs warning people to keep away, thousands of tourists visit each year, much to the risk of their own health. Up until the 1930s, the area surrounding Wittennum was largely unused, until Langley Hancock discovered blue asbestos crocodylite in an area, unknowing at the time, but this is the most dangerous type of asbestos. It was typically used in rope lacking and pipe insulation, as well as in cement sheets and for ceiling tiles. During the 1950s, Wittennum was the area's largest settlement, with a peak population of an estimated 20,000 coming and going from the town. For over a decade, Wittennum was the only supplier of blue asbestos in Australia, exporting 150,000 tons. In 1966, the Wittennum Gorge mine was closed due to unprofitability and increasing concerns over the health of miners. The following year, Australia banned the mining of blue asbestos. Of those who worked and resided in the town, over 2,000 have since died from illnesses caused by asbestos, including lung cancer, asbestosis, and mesothelioma. In 2007, the town was completely delisted, meaning it was completely shut down and then removed from the map. The town has literally been wiped from the map. Local tourist brochures just leave a vague blank area where Wittennum actually is, and the national park don't feature the town despite covering everywhere else within a 1,000-kilometer radius. Coming in at number 2 we have Ashgabat, Turkmenistan. Close to the border of Iran, Ashgabat, Turkmenistan is a former Soviet Union country run by President Saparmurat Niyazov. Much of the city was destroyed by the 1948 Ashgabat earthquake, where buildings crumbled to the ground, but has since been extensively rebuilt under the rule of the new president. The president planned to create a golden area of Turkmenistan in 1991 with the building of Ashgabat. He did so by building the city with the most marble buildings in the world. Thus, Ashgabat, the Turkmenistan capital, is a city of marble buildings and fountains. It is also an empty city with a population of around 700,000 people. Though the majority of the population doesn't live in the city, they live in the suburbs that are located outside the city limits. The only residents in Ashgabat are made of marble, as is the whole city. The buildings in the city are all made of white marble. The marbled maze of buildings and statues is very much the facade of the museum district, and it is these images that have gone around the world showcasing what can be done with millions of dollars at your disposal. Governments, museums, and theatre buildings, as well as expanses of parks, dominate the whole district. The unique looking architecture is nothing similar to that of any other city. There are few reasons why no one is permitted to live in the city, and for one is to keep the white marble clean. Another reason is that it gets so hot that it's not practical to walk in. Moreover, the public is forbidden to talk about the fact that the city is empty. Thus, one can only infer that the city was not built for the locals but used as a statue object to show the richness of the government. Today, the city is referred to as the City of the Dead because it appears so empty. This is in part also because of the country's isolated culture, as Turkmenistan is one of the least visited countries in the world. And finally, in at number 1 we have Hashima Island in Japan. Just 15 kilometers from Nagasaki and in front of the Japanese coastline, you'll find the abandoned island and city of Hashima. In the late 1950s, the island had a population of over 5,200 people. The people that resided on the island were mostly coal miners and their families. Since the island is so small at its peak in population, it was once the most densely populated place on the planet and 9 times the population density of Tokyo. Now the island is left completely abandoned and is effectively crumbling to pieces. The coal mining facility was previously called Battleship Island because its buildings and seawall make it resemble a warship. As for the island's fate, it was abandoned in the 1970s when petroleum fuels made coal obsolete. The island was built by Korean and Chinese prisoners who were forced to work after World War II. The conditions of these forced laborers were hard and some never made it back home. The people who worked here named the island Jail Island Island or even Hell Island. In 1974, the mine started to run out of coal and people left the island. Soon the island's uninhabited parts were reclaimed by nature. The weather conditions started affecting the concrete and buildings started falling apart. Sometimes people camped out here, but that was a very dangerous thing to do. The government wanted to discourage people from going over on their own, and therefore decided to open it to the public. Even though tourists are allowed to visit the island today, the echoes of the past still linger here. Fishermen who sail near the island claim they have seen strange flickering lights in the buildings, even though the island has no electricity. Strange noises have been heard and cold spots have been felt. People say that they had the sensation of being watched, and there were some claims of people that had been touched by unseen hands.
Home of the infamous Kid Nation reality show and Rust Baldwin incident. While it wasn't terrifying enough to make the top 5, it'll always be on my I want to visit but don't feel like being cursed list. And now that I feel like I've chatted on plenty enough, welcome to the top 5 terrifying ghost towns left completely abandoned. In 5th place, we have Isla de las Muñecas, Mexico. Decided to kick off today by being an overachiever. This is an entire abandoned island. The island of the dolls in Mexico is like something straight out of a horror movie, but my kind of horror movie. Located on Tunichil Lake, it is home to hundreds of hanging, slowly decaying dolls, thanks to a man named Don Julian Santana. Over 50 years ago, Don Santana left his wife and child and moved onto an island on Tunichil Lake in the Exoquimelicos canals. According to him, a young girl actually drowned in the lake in the 1950s, and Don Julian Santana devoted his life to honoring this lost soul by collecting and hanging up dolls by the hundreds. Eventually, he transformed the entire island into a doll-infested wonderland. Now, he began collecting lost dolls from the canals and the trash near his island home. He's also said to have traded produce he grew to locals for more dolls. Don didn't really clean up the dolls or attempt to fix them, but he rather put them up with missing eyes and limbs, covered in dirt, and generally in whatever ramshackle state he found them in. Even when dolls arrived in good shape, the wind and weather turned them into cracked and distorted versions of themselves. Don also kept his cabin filled with the dolls, which he dressed in headdresses, sunglasses, and other various accessories. Despite the fact that most people found the island frightening, Don saw the dolls as beautiful protectors, and he welcomed visitors, whom he would, show around, charging a small fee for taking photos. In 2001, Don Santana was found drowned in the same area in which he believed that small child had passed away. According to legend, the dolls in the island are haunted by the spirits of the dead girl, and perhaps even by Don himself. Okay, who wants to go on a road trip with me? Anyone?
Oh, thanks.
In 4th place, we have Pripyat, Ukraine. So Pripyat is an abandoned city in northern Ukraine located near the border with Belarus. Named after the nearby river of the same name, it was founded on February 4th of 1970 as the 9th Atomgrad, which was a type of closed town in the Soviet Union to serve the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant, which was located in the adjacent ghost city of Chernobyl. So Pripyat was officially proclaimed a city in 1979 and had grown to a population of around 49,000 by the time it was evacuated on the afternoon of April 27th of 1986, one day after the Chernobyl disaster, making it younger as a city at that time than I am now. Although it was located within the administrative district of Ivankiv Rayon, the abandoned municipality now has a status of City of Regional Significance within the larger Kyiv Oblast and is administered directly from the capital of Kyiv. Pripyat is also supervised by the State Emergency Service of Ukraine, which manages activities for the entire Chernobyl exclusion zone. So following the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster, the entire population of Pripyat was moved to the purpose-built city of Slavutich. At the time of the evacuation, the average age of residents was about 26 years old, and the city housed 13,414 apartments in 160 apartment blocks, with 18 halls of residence accommodating up to, let's say, 7,600 single males or females, and 8 halls of residence for married couples. In terms of education, there were 15 kindergartens and elementary schools for 4,980 children, each with their own nickname, and 5 secondary schools for about 6,000 students. In 2019, it was announced that folks could start visiting the affected areas if certain health and safety procedures were followed, but I don't feel like visiting a radiation-affected city is high up on my bucket list at this point in time. In 3rd place, time to visit the Bodie State Historic Park. So formerly a genuine gold mining town, located east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in Mono County, California, and now a national landmark, it is known as one of the best preserved ghost towns in the world. It is named after W.S. Bodie, first name unknown, but rumored to be either William or Waterman, who discovered gold in 1859 in an area now known as Brody Bluff. He tragically passed in a snowstorm that same winter and was never present for what came to be. According to pioneer Judge McClinton, the district's name was changed from the proper spelling of Bodey to Body, and then a few other phonetic variations, to eventually Bodie, after a painter in the nearby boomtown of Aurora lettered a sign as such. An accidental typo that stuck through history, which is a good reminder to proofread your work. I don't do it enough. While the output from the mine is largely insignificant in terms of mining history, the violence and early endings to lives tell a different story. And a particularly harsh winter between 1878 and 79 claimed hundreds of lives, with many others perishing from falling timbers and explosions underground. So Bodie as a town grew to have a reputation for violence and lawlessness. And unlike other mining camps at the time, killings were daily events. Robberies, stage holdups, and fights happened at such a frequency that no complete record could be kept. Reverend F.M. Warrington would describe the area in 1881 as a sea of sin, lashed by the tempests of lust and passion. The first of 4 mysterious fires tore through the business district in 1892, the next destroying the town mill in 1912, and another destroying the same mill again in 1898. The last of the unknown fires demolished most of what was left of the now ghost town in 1932, taking many lives way too soon in the process. So when the last producing mine shut down after 1945, very few people were left living in what was left of the town, and all eventually met untimely ends. One man shot his wife unprompted, and 3 other men from the town took it upon themselves to take his life for that act. So according to historians, the ghost of that man would visit the 3 men after his passing, shaking his fist and appearing as if he was cursing them out. Those men soon died of mysterious diseases and illnesses. Visitors to the area have reported meeting spirits that leave them feeling suffocated, seeing doors open and close on their own, and rocking chairs that may or may not have a menacing older lady staring them down, or even the empty chair rocking on its own. Though Bodie might be a bit of a tourist destination nowadays, but if you remove anything from the land, I'm talking like a pebble, you'll be cursed with remorse and tragedy. The park keeps a logbook of all letters and items returned to them, with each thief writing an apology note to Bodie for what was taken. The curse is upheld by the ghosts of residents past who guard against thieves and protect the town's treasures. Okay, so kleptos, steer clear or be cursed. Number 3, the island of Poglia. Yep, an entirely abandoned island, and it's got quite the history. So the island is located in the lagoon near Venice, and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in all of Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from the island, which was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick, to prevent the spread of disease, and contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. Yeah, I'll backtrack and elaborate. In 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice and Poglia, like many other small islands at the time, and it became a quarantine colony. The plague on average killed 1 out of 3 Europeans, so fearing the crazy spread of the disease, Venice exiled many of its symptom-bearing citizens there. Go. At the island center, the dead and those too sick to protest were burned on giant pyres. This included the tens of thousands of Venice citizens dying on the mainland. These fires were burned once more in 1630 when the Black Death again swept through the city. A small island was used as a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil, so I hope it's a good fertilizer. The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. A doctor at the asylum was known to have experimented on patients with crude lobotomies and jumped from the bell tower in the 1930s after claiming he'd been driven mad by ghosts. Decades later, nearby residents claimed to still hear the bell, although it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that some restoration work has started in recent history, but abruptly stopped without explanation, so maybe this is one spot on today's list that I don't want to visit, ever. Number 2, Bodie State Historic Park. Formerly a genuine gold mining town located east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in Mono County, California, and now a national landmark, it is known as one of the best preserved ghost towns in the world. It is named after W.S. Bodie, first name unknown, but rumored to be either William or Waterman, who discovered gold in 1859 in an area now known as Brody Bluff. He tragically passed away in a snowstorm that same winter and was never present for what came to be. According to pioneer Judge McClinton, the district's name was changed from the proper spelling of Bodey to Body, and then a few other phonetic variations, to eventually Bodie after a painter in the nearby boomtown of Aurora lettered a sign as such, an accidental typo that got stuck through history, which is a good reminder to proofread your work. While the output from the mine is largely insignificant in terms of mining history, the violence and early endings to lives tell a different story. A particularly harsh winter between 1878 and 79 claimed hundreds of lives, with many others perishing from falling timber and explosions underground. Bodie as a town grew to have a reputation for violence and lawlessness, and unlike other mining camps at the time, killings were daily events. Robberies, stage holdups, and fights happened at such a frequency that no complete complete record could be kept. Reverend F.M. Warrington would describe the area in 1881 as a sea of sin, lashed by tempests of lust and passion. The first of 4 mysterious fires tore through the business district in 1892, the next destroying the town mill in 1912, and another destroying the same mill again in 1898. The last of the unknown fires demolished most of what was left of the now ghost town in 1932, taking many lives too soon in the process. When the last producing mine shut down after 1945, very few people were left living in what was left of the town, and all eventually met untimely ends. One man shot his wife unprompted, and 3 other men from the town took it upon themselves to take his life for the act. According to historians, the ghost of that man would visit the 3 men after his passing, shaking his fist and appearing as if he was cursing them out. Those men soon died of mysterious diseases and illnesses. Visitors to the area have reported meeting spirits that leave them feeling suffocated, seeing doors open and close on their own, and rocking chairs that may or may not have a menacing older lady staring them down, or even the empty chair rocking on its own. Nowadays, if you remove anything from the land, even like a little pebble, you'll be cursed with remorse and tragedy. The curse is upheld by the ghosts of residents past, who guard against thieves and protect the town's treasures. So kleptos, steer clear or be cursed. Number 1. Plymouth. The Caribbean island of Montserrat was quite the getaway spot in the 1980s after music producer Sir George Martin opened a recording studio there called Air. The appeal of working with his team and spending a few weeks or months recording in a tropical paradise was so compelling that the world's most famous rock stars, had a good time there. We're talking like Mick Jagger, Elton John, Stevie Wonder, and Paul McCartney all laid down tracks. The party sadly ended abruptly when twin disasters struck the island. Beginning on the 18th of July in 1995, a series of huge eruptions at the South Friar Hills volcano, which had been inactive for centuries, sent pyroclastic flows and ash falls across a wide area of southern Montserrat, including the capital of Plymouth. On the 21st of August in 1995, tephra fell on Plymouth, necessitating an evacuation that lasted until September 3rd. Following renewed volcanic activity on the 1st of December, residents were evacuated for the second time, but were allowed back on the 1st of January. On April 3rd, it was evacuated for the third and final time. The island was divided into risk zones. During some periods, entry into Plymouth was prohibited, and at other times it was allowed during daytime only to those with the means of rapid escape. And the last time that access was legally allowed to the area during daytime was June 16th of 1997, which was right before I was born. On the 25th of June, a further massive eruption produced pyroclastic surges that killed 19 people and reached nearly to the island's airport on the eastern side of the island, which had remained open until that time. Between the 4th to the 8th of August of that year, a further series of large eruptions destroyed approximately 80% of the town, burying it under 1.4 meters of ash. This hot material burned many of the buildings, making habitation nearly impossible for many of the residents. The flows, lava, ash, and other volcanic rock types were mostly compact, having a density similar to that of concrete. The removal of the overburden would have required the use of explosives, bulldozers, and other resources way too expensive for all of this. It was anticipated that the soil underneath the hardened mud and lava would have been scorched and left completely non-arable by the intense heat of the pyroclastic flows. The entire south half of the island was declared an exclusion zone because of the continuing volcanic activity at the hills. So the government of the island was moved north to the town of Brady's, although Plymouth still remains the technical capital. Recently, Montserrat has begun chaperoning driving tours into the exclusion zone, where visitors can walk through the ruins of the former capital, which now lies buried under some 20 feet of ash and stone, where the smoking volcano still pumps over 350 tons of sulfur dioxide into the sky every day. During a tour, one sees modern concrete buildings shattered by the unbelievable force of nature. Over 10 feet of ash and mud have buried so much of the city that in certain areas only rooftops poke up from the dust. We're talking like papers and envelopes are stacked on desktop piles of work, which were made pointless by the pile of ash that fills up the floor and outside balconies. 19 people died from breaking the law and entering the exclusion zone before it was safe, by the way. The hot gas cooked their lungs, and they looked similar to mummies when they were eventually found.
Number 5. The Arredale Asylum. Arredale Asylum in Victoria, Australia is the largest abandoned asylum in Australia, a dubious distinction, besides the honor that it might be the most haunted building in Australia as well. The asylum first opened its doors in 1865, and on first opening used to bear a much more wild name, being the Arredale Lunatic Asylum. And its 130 years of active service, over 13,000 people are said to have breathed their last inside the asylum. So is it a wonder the place is thought to be haunted? Iredale was hardly a place built to help the sick. It was commissioned to help empty jails out and accommodate the increasing number of insane people in Victoria who were being locked up. Now, the conditions for what made someone legally insane back then were generous, to say the least. These would include people with Down syndrome, epilepsy, autism, even women suffering from postpartum depression. Oh, the lunatics. The asylum was structured more like a prison than it was a hospital. The walls were designed to give off the illusion of freedom, designed cruelly to be sloped, which meant from the inside they were too tall to climb over, and you could tell that, but from the outside they looked low and didn't suggest imprisonment, meaning it looked welcoming and inviting while you were coming on in, but then once you were locked in you realized you were trapped. Unsurprisingly, the place did not treat its patients particularly well. Lobotomies were common practice, oftentimes without anesthetic. So these days, even though the place has been abandoned and doesn't see patients anymore, it's quite the popular spot for ghost hunting. There are complaints of feeling cold drafts running through the old offices. Scary banging can be heard on the walls. Now Iredale is closed, but they do offer tours, and one tour guide spoke out saying, "I was the biggest skeptic of the paranormal imaginable when I started. I've changed my mind completely. I've seen things here, heard things in here, felt things in here that I can't explain." There was a paranormal group that came through, and when they tried one of the restraining jackets on, one of them started screaming, "Get it off me, get it off me, get it off me." And when they took the jacket off of him, there was a bite mark on his neck. That's one of the things I can't explain, and I can't either. And hey, if you're looking for a vacation to a haunted spot, you don't even have to leave your room. You can stay right where you are because you can subscribe to Top 5 Scary. We have got more haunted sites than you could ever visit in a lifetime, all just a click away. So click on through, hit the bell, stay subscribed, and don't miss a single thing. But do that once the credits roll in this video, okay? We got way more haunted stuff coming for you. Number 4, Leap Castle. For 700 years, Leap Castle has proudly stood in Ireland, boasting a infamous reputation as the most haunted castle in the world. I'm sure Dracula is deeply offended by that statement, but he's mostly fictional, so really, what can you do? This castle was first built in the 13th century, home to the O'Bannon clan, but it would be adopted by the O'Carroll clan, who seized control of it by the 15th century, and they did not seize control nicely. From here, ownership would pass from father to son, but was frequently punctuated by plots, assassinations, rival clan wars, and even O'Carroll family members assassinating each other were all par for the course for Leap Castle's history. Think like Succession, but 10 times worse. A grim oubliette where prisoners would be pushed from a window, landing into a pit of spikes, completed the castle. After centuries of battles and brawls over the castle, it was burned in 1922 during the Irish Civil War, where it was then abandoned. Now it goes without saying that a castle that saw this much death is a home to a bevy of trapped spirits, the most present one being the chapel spirit. Legend has it that one of the O'Carrolls had his own brother assassinated to gain power. His brother, a member of the clergy, is said to restlessly wander the burnt out chapel. Visitors report seeing beams of light, the smell of burnt rubber, and the shadow of a priest in the stairwell. There's also stories of a young girl named Emily who fell from the rampart in the 16th century and tragically lost her life. There's stories of seeing the young girl walking atop the battlements, dragging a misshapen leg as she walks. Today, you can visit Leap Castle if you're feeling daring enough to contact the owner Sean Ryan, who does offer private tours. It'll be you, him, and all the spirits you can handle. Number 3, Hbashu Forest. Our next entry is going to take us to Transylvania, to Romania, the Hbashu Forest, and please do forgive me, my Romanian ain't quite what it used to be and it was never much to begin with. The forest is beautiful, if not more than a little haunted, with countless reports of all kinds of paranormal activity stemming from within the hectares of the creepy, bountiful woods. The place kinda looks like it's the set to a Halloween movie as is, with the twisted trees curling ever outwards. Now, there are many legends and stories coming out of the forest. It's even been called the Bermuda Triangle of Romania. According to one particularly exciting legend, a girl went wandering in the forest one day to escape the difficulties of life and take her mind off her troubles. She found herself lost in the forest and nature, but she never returned. Her family looked and looked for her, but to no avail. They never found her and assumed that their daughter had passed until she reappeared and walked home 5 years later, unsure where she'd been and didn't remember anything of the experience and hadn't aged a day on her. that is far from the only strange thing that's happened here. Take a listen to this folktale. A shepherd and his flock of over 200 sheep were said to have vanished without a single trace. You'd think there'd be one footprint out of 200 sheep. Another story tells of a woman who went wandering through the forest and came back and discovered she had a 15th century coin placed in her pocket, as if a ghost left her a little surprise to take home. In the 1960s, biologist Alexander Sift photographed a strange object that he saw above the sky of the Hbashu Forest, which would gain notoriety as a UFO sighting. I'm gonna stop and ask here, basically, what wasn't happening here that was supernatural? Is there anything normal natural about this forest, or is it just all haunted all the way down? If we've had any Romanian viewers, you may let us know about this one. Yeah.
Number 2 on this list is Bangar Fort. This fort is located in India and is definitely one of the country's most haunted locations. Between Jaipur and Alwar in Rajasthan lie the ruins of what was once a splendid kingdom. The fort was built by the ruler of Amber Kachawaha for his youngest son in 1573, and gradually its population dwindled until 1783, when a strong famine forced the villagers still living there to flee. Local legends state that the reason for the kingdom falling into ruin was that the fort was cursed. As the only legally recognized haunted place in India, according to the Times of India, a government permit is required to be able to enter before dawn or after sundown. Although it's said that the reason is down to wild nocturnal animals such as tigers and the lack of artificial lighting in the area, no one knows what else could be lurking in the ruins. Literally, this place is legally recognized as being cursed. There are very few places in the world where the government has actually claimed that it's cursed, but this is one of them. I know that you have to be on the lookout for tigers and other wild animals, but if this place is truly haunted, as people suspect it is, then wild animals are going to be the least of your worries. This is an ancient fort. Who knows what type of death or evil things transpired here over the years? If it's actually cursed, then there could be so many different types of ghouls or creatures lurking down there, just waiting for some unsuspecting victim to come down. And number 1 on this list is Dolce Base. We often look at Area 51 as the big and scary base in America, but Dolce Base is right up there too as a place you probably should not go. Holidify says Dolce is a quaint town near the Colorado border in New Mexico. With a population of 2,600 Native Americans, this town serves as an underground laboratory where unbelievable experiments take place. It is said that the Dolce Base is a massive hidden compound that houses incredibly advanced technologies and human-animal hybrids. This base has very tight security and is regarded as one of the top forbidden places in the world and in the USA. Very recently we were talking about human-animal hybrids, and I brought up in that video how some of them might be hidden from the public. Human-animal hybrids have gotten a lot of backlash, so doing them in a top secret base where no one is watching might make more sense from a government standpoint. Whatever they are truly doing down here though, it's clear that if you go in, you're not going to be coming back out. If you don't have the proper clearance, then heading into this base would definitely be a death sentence. I, for one, don't want to be turned into a half-horse human being thing, so I'd stay away. Number 3 on this list is Central City Masonic Cemetery. Of course we had to have a cemetery on this list. No haunted place list would be complete without at least one of them. Thrillist says, founded as a mining town in the late 1800s, Central City is now known as a destination for those looking to head to the hills for a gambling fix in the casinos that now dot the area. But one thing hasn't changed. The woman in black who twice a year appears in this hilltop cemetery above the town. Known as the Columbine Lady, she comes to visit the grave of John Cameron, a prominent former resident of Central City who died in 1884. Some believe she is his fiancée, appearing to leave flowers for her lost love on November 1st, the anniversary of Cameron's death, and April 5th, a date for which the significance remains a mystery, much like the woman herself. This place is safe to go to if, of course, you do not go during these times. She's been coming for a long time, and anyone who tried to interfere with her has had to pay the price. Now, people kind of suspect that she was in a relationship with John Cameron, but there's also another theory. Many people think that John actually wronged her in his life, and that that this woman in black comes twice a year to double check that John is still dead and hasn't come back to life by some means. Pretty scary tale for sure, one that you probably don't want to get involved with. Number 2 on this list is the Broadmoor. Located in Colorado Springs, this hotel would be freaking awesome if it wasn't so haunted. Thrillist says this sprawling 5-star hotel has a lot to offer for anyone seeking a relaxing and indulgent getaway. But along with the golf course, spa, and nearby zoo, there's one feature you won't find in any brochure. Staff and guests alike have reported the presence of a woman, often in the penthouse where Julia Penrose, co-founder of the property, once lived. While not confirmed, Penrose's death is said to have been surrounded by a strange occurrence in which she went missing and was later found, confused and shaking in the woods nearby with no memory of how she got there. She passed away a week later, and perhaps her spirit remains, watching over the property and seeking answers about her own mysterious death. Now I am wondering, man, how did Penrose die? Like, this whole story feels like a movie or something like that. I truly think somebody needs to get in here and investigate what the heck happened here. Because, like, should we be scared of the region because this is gonna happen again? Was Julia doing something specific before she disappeared, and should we avoid doing that thing? There are just so many questions that need to be answered here, and sadly I can't do it from the comfort of Toronto. That being said, I'm also not trying to end up like Julia, and therefore will be leaving this job to somebody far more qualified. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Highlands Ranch Mansion. A truly picturesque mansion, one that's been standing for over 100 years and one that's home to a ghostly spirit. Thrillist says this sprawling stone mansion, built in 1891, is often rented for weddings and events due to its impressive structural beauty and picturesque prairie views. But it's also a historic property and somewhat of a museum of the times, with a bit of paranormal activity sprinkled in. The ghost of Julia Kistler, daughter of F. Kistler, who bought the property in 1926, is said to haunt the home, with visitors and staff alike reporting hearing a woman's sobs, seeing a silhouette figure moving about when the mansion was otherwise vacant, and lights sporadically turning on and off. I don't know about you guys, but during my wedding ceremony, I want to hear beautiful sounding music, not the sobs of some ghost woman thing. Apparently she's crying all the time, and this woman's emotions are not something to play with. There's a story where once several children were playing around here. There was a wedding ceremony scheduled here for later that day, and the children were off doing what kids do before the proceedings got underway. They ran into this ghost crying, and then they started to make fun of her. They were rude and definitely unkind, but they also didn't deserve what she did next. It's said that in a fit of rage, she flew inside their bodies and possessed each and every one of them for a short time, showing them things that were truly terrifying. Things that have ultimately changed those boys' lives and altered their mentality forever. Any ghost that's capable of doing something like that, that's one that I don't want to be around.